Located in North Carolina's northwest corner, Ashe County lays on a rolling mountain plateau that ranges from 2,500 to 3,000 feet above sea level. Isolated by its rugged mountainous terrain, Ashe County was described in the 19th and early 20th centuries as one of North Carolina's lost provinces. Bordered by Virginia to the north and Tennessee to the west, Ashe County is considered part of South Central Appalachia. Unlike its Appalachian neighbors to the north, Ashe County lacked the coal and mineral resources that other parts of Appalachia enjoyed. Truth be told, life has never been easy here. Traditionally, families survived by living on small farms and growing their own food. The most important crops in this type of agriculture were potatoes, corn, and green beans. From everyday dinners to summer canning marathons, green beans became a staple for generations of mountain folk.
Historically, beans were incredibly important for the Appalachian diet, and there's a tremendous diversity of beans that we still continue to eat, and they can have a lot of protein, they have a lot of fiber. They're, again, very easy to grow.
I mean, you pick beans out of your garden and you can beans. People would can 100 plus quarts of beans a year, and we ate pretty much out of what we canned. And you didn't go to the store a lot like you do now.
Beans were very important in our family meal. I remember eating beans almost every day in the summertime and canned beans in the winter.
For the last 2 centuries, the cultivation of green beans has been more than just a farming practice in Ashe County. It's been a matter of survival. Passed down through the families, the knowledge of planting, growing, and harvesting this essential crop has been a constant thread in the fabric of local Appalachian culture. During the mid-20th century, a dramatic shift occurred, and folks in Ashe County began growing beans on a commercial scale. Slowly at first, but then on a massive scale, with green beans soon becoming the largest and most important crop in the region, generating millions of dollars through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. What then was the spark that motivated local farmers to take the leap and start doubling, tripling, and quadrupling their green bean production? The answer's complicated. Undoubtedly, the success of farmers growing and selling green beans next door in Johnson County, Tennessee, which proclaimed itself the green bean capital of the world in the 1940s, played a significant factor. Travis Birdsell, former county extension director, feels that the experiences of certain Ashe County families peddling their produce off the mountain also contributed to the belief that Ashe County had something the world would be eager to buy.
So in Ashe County, green beans, I probably guess, have always been grown. In backyards, beside of houses. It was really a way of life. It was about feeding your family. But we all want to do a little bit more than feed our family. We also want to have a little jingle in our pocket so we can buy some things, so we can have our family lifted up a little bit. And with green beans, I think that possibly started with a 1926 Stake Body Chevrolet purchased by the Rowland family. They would load that truck up with produce and drive all the way down to Charlotte on Tryon Street. Now at that point in time, Tryon was just a gravel road. They would drive down the day before because it took a whole day to drive to Charlotte. They'd sleep underneath the truck and then wake up the next day and start selling. Well, when they sold stuff, what they realized was green beans were really profitable in the summer. People wanted them because they wouldn't grow down there because it's too hot. So come back here, ask people for more green beans, more people start growing them, then you start selling them in more places. And I believe that really is the birth of an industry.
So the Appalachia and the tri-state mountain bean area, and there's a lot of studies done, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia, because this would be the hub of the eastern bean production area, specifically in the 1940s, because we had the climate, we had the know-how, we had the knowledge to do it, and we had the labor force. It wasn't a foreign crop. It was something that they were raising in their gardens, and then it really easily transitioned to a crop production system. 2 rows in the garden, 200 rows in a field. The production was the same, how you did it, how you prepared the ground, the problems you would come up with against weeds, insects, diseases were all very similar.
Part of it's our physical location on the East Coast. we sit in this sweet spot right between, halfway between New York and Florida. So we can access interstates and trucking to go in either direction.
Blessed with these comparative advantages, a good climate and a fertile soil, the generational knowledge of how to grow a quality bean, an untapped labor force of women and children hungry to join the cash economy, and a great location for delivering to markets and canneries both north and south, Ashe County was poised to become a green bean growing powerhouse by the late 1940s. But with all things farming, nothing was ever guaranteed.
Farming is the biggest gamble in the world. You're up against the weather, you're up against diseases, you're up against markets, you're up against, in the case of the bean industry, laborers, you're up against transportation.
Well, there was a whole lot of hard work and a lot of curiosity, wondering what was going to happen. You was worried about frosty mornings, and you worried about floods, and you worried about drought. And it was just like riding the point of the spear. You had to manage your labor. Labor was a problem. Weather was a problem. Groundhogs was a problem. Insects was a problem. And it just all made a conglomerate that you had to live with. And I learned to make the best of it.
The two main types of green beans traditionally grown in Ashe County were bush beans and pole beans. Bush beans grow in compact bushes that are 1 to 2 feet tall and don't need support. One of the more popular bush bean varieties grown in Ashe County was tender green beans. Pole beans, on the other hand, grow tall and need a support such as a pole or a wire to attach to. Given proper support, pole beans can grow over 10 feet tall. One of the most successful pole bean varieties was Morse's 191, which was developed in 1930s California by the Ferry Morse Seed Company. Pole beans also take longer to mature than bush beans, but they do continue producing beans longer over several weeks or even months, whereas bush beans mature quicker, providing a concentrated harvest all at once.
Bush beans will take about 60 days for their first harvest. Pole beans may take a little bit longer. Maybe as early as February or March, we're going to start plowing and then going ahead and disking and getting that ground ready because we need a really good seed bed. After that, the big task is weed control. In those early days, it was going to be done by horses or mules, cultivation, later on with tractors, but also it took a lot of handwork.
It was usually the 1st of July before we picked our first beans. I don't believe we ever picked any in June, but 1st of July we'd have beans.
The people who picked the beans were primarily women and children. And this is really important because it was their first time, in many instances, to enter the cash economy and to make that daily wage labor. The most important part of the bean industry wasn't necessarily the planting, it wasn't even the selling, it was the picking. That took about 60% or more of the entire labor that took to grow a bean from seed to market. But the problem was getting all those laborers to the fields. So we had a lot of people that would purchase trucks, and they had trucks, and they would cram these pickers in the back of these trucks. Oftentimes they got paid per head to deliver pickers to the field. We have some great stories where truck drivers got 50 cents a head. We know one truck driver, he bragged he got 78 people in the back of a truck one morning. And he made lots of money that day just for hauling those pickers to the field and then taking them back home that evening.
We had an old country store about a mile from the house, and us kids would walk down there about every day. It was, you'd buy some groceries there, but it's also the loafing place. You'd loaf. And they had a place you could play horseshoes, and the young folks did that a lot. So they would say every now and then, so-and-so needs help picking beans. If anyone's interested, be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we'd walk out and meet them down there. And usually it would be some cars, that like carpooling, or the back of a pickup truck that you'd ride. My husband, he grew up in Lansing, and he remembers that there was a bus that would come pick them up, and it was painted green, and he said they would call it the green bean bus. But we didn't have that privilege. We just rode in cars in the truck.
We'd ride the bean truck. The bean truck run up in there, and they'd haul us bean pickers on the back of a cattle rack. It had a cattle rack on it, a 2-ton truck, I guess. And they'd let us know when they was coming by that morning, and Mom would say, well, the bean truck's going to run tomorrow. We got to get ready, go pick beans. So we'd get ready and get on the bean truck and ride sometimes out to Fleetwood, different places, and pick them. I generally pick with my dad when I was young.
Well, one thing about riding a bean truck, we would sing, me and 2 or 3 girls would sing all the time. And I've just sung all my life. And
sing me the verse of something you would have sang on the bean truck.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Bean picking is really hard work. Pole beans, there's a lot of great oral history that people would much rather pick pole beans because they got to stand up. Those beans, the way they hung, you can grab those beans, you can put those in the hamper, and you could really get a lot done because you were paid on a per bushel picked basis. It wasn't hourly work, it was production work. So the more beans you could pick in a day, the more money you could make.
The fellows that did the sweating was the one that pulled them off the vine and put them in the basket.
Was it hard work?
It was hard work and back-breaking. Snap beans was back-breaking. Pole beans not quite as bad because you could go up and down. The motion broke the monotony of being humped over.
If you wasn't short, tall people it was rougher on tall people because you was bent over all the time. And if you're short, you's down there closer to where you was working at. It really helped. But most everybody got down on their knees eventually. They'd come out of there with mud caked on their pants or at their knees, dirt, or they'd walk through there on their knees picking beans. That's the easiest way to do it.
Well, I really hate picking green beans. If I had to rely on that, I think for food, I would starve. My mother loved picking beans. She would drag me to the bean field, and I tried to find many ways to get out of picking those beans because that basket never got full. Didn't matter how hard I picked, it looked like it was so big, and it was like a barrel and me trying to fill it. And here she was, already had 2 bushel, and I didn't even have a half.
when I guess I started when I was about 11, picking, and when the sun got real hot and I wanted Mommy to let me go to the shade, she didn't mind. She'd let us go to the shade till we got older and were used to picking beans and picked, all day.
I was so slow probably picking beans because I like to have fun more than I like to pick beans. I like to throw beans, I like to talk, I like to listen to everybody else's tales, and really my heart just wasn't in it. So I got no awards for bean picking.
It's a hard job, being over back-breaking, but it make you a little extra money. Not much, but a little.
Sometimes you'd have a row of your own. Sometimes somebody'd start at each end of the row, and you'd pick till you met. We'd pick when you got your basket. It was a basket just like this. Got that full. They had guys that would come by and pick them up and take them to the truck, and they would give you a little square piece of paper about like a Post-it note, and you'd stick that in your pocket and keep it till the end of the day. And forever, you got one of those forever bushel, and each one of those was 50 cents. And we'd pick till the end of the day, and then you'd go turn your little square pieces of paper in and get your money. And I think the most I ever got was probably around $20. An average day for me was more like 12 to 15. I wasn't a real good bean picker. Some of those little old ladies that you'd see them and they looked like they weighed maybe 90 pounds. man, they could pick beans. They'd pick twice as much as I did.
I like picking beans if it was on a cool day, not really hot, and if the beans were nice. Mostly if the beans were nice beans, if they weren't wet. If they were nice beans, it was fun, especially when you had several people there, you know, and sometimes you would have lots of people.
I was probably 13 or 14 years old when I was working in pole beans. So you just selected a row and you started picking beans. I mean, if the beans were plentiful, and most times they were, I could pick a bushel of pole beans in less than 20 minutes. So I always carried a second basket. When that one got full, I started picking into the other one. But then you had to yell for the weigher. So it was always weigher, lugger. And as soon as the lugger showed up, he'd give you a ticket.
They called us luggers, but we carried the beans out of the field after they'd been weighed. They had to be 32-pound weight with a hamper and all. And then they would holler for a lugger, and we would take them. It's according to how you was doing it. If you was going to leave them in the basket, you'd take a brand new basket out there and swap baskets with them after they weighed them. And then you'd carry that basket back to where the truck was sitting.
And they had a water boy. You could yell for the water boy, and he'd bring the water around, just an old galvanized bucket with a dipper.
Oh, I was probably 10. I had a bucket of water, a metal bucket, and a big dipper, water dipper. Would carry it around in the field, and they'd raise their hand and holler, "Water boy," and they'd go over there and they'd get that dipper and get them a drink of water. I mean, everybody had the same dipper, and nobody thought anything about it.
While bean picking was hard work, it did have a social aspect that many people, especially the young ones, thoroughly enjoyed. From riding the bean truck to buying a soda and sandwich at the local country store, it gave them a rare chance to interact with their friends during what would otherwise have been long summers at home in the hills and hollers of rural Appalachia.
We'd pick till lunchtime, and everybody brought their lunch and in a paper sack or something, and we'd all sit down together and eat lunch, and that'd be kind of a socializing time. And a lot of times there's a lot of young people there, and you'd flirt with some of the boys and court a little, as they said, that sort of thing.
We were picking in one field, and there's 2 or 3 boys came over to pick, and I told my mama to get them away from me. She said, "Well, they're not bothering you. They're just putting beans in your basket." But
remember that my experience with green beans was going on all over the county at the time. And as I've said, it was very hard work, and I didn't particularly like to do it. But we also had fun, because riding on that flatbed truck back and forth, you know how kids get together. And eating lunch, we had a chance to socialize, so there was a lot of fun involved, too.
Besides being fun in the sense that they got to see their friends, bean picking also provided many local kids with their first opportunity to earn cash and spend it how they wanted.
The money I earned from picking beans, usually I would save it till the end of the summer, and I'd buy me some school clothes. I usually could buy a couple of outfits, maybe a pair of shoes, and of course I'd spend a little now and then on a soft drink or something like that.
I remember Rose's store put in skirts for like $2.98 and $3.98, and I'd buy school clothes, and they had blouses for $1. And the skirts had borders, and they had blouses to match the border. And that was good to get to go to Rose's and buy clothes for school.
Well, it was very important. I was going to save up my money, to put on me a car when I got to where I could drive. I never did make enough of picking beans to buy it, but it helped.
I usually had my aunt, I would give her the money. I would pick my school clothes out of Sears and Roebuck catalog, and she would write a check and order it for me. The mailman came right by our house, so we would wait about a week and get our school clothes.
Was that like Christmas?
Just like Christmas. It was just like Christmas.
I mean, I could make $12 to $14 a day picking pole beans. But I mean, you had to hustle. I didn't spend a whole lot of money back then. I opened up a savings account at the First National Bank and saved the money. And actually, my brother and I bought our first car from he picked beans too, and from what we saved picking beans and milking cows, you know.
After the beans were picked, weighed, lugged, and loaded on the trucks at the field, they were driven to a bean auction, usually the same day they were picked. Over the years, 3 different bean auctions or markets operated in Ashe County. One in West Jefferson, one on Radio Hill, and later one in Smithport.
The bean market was really the hub of the green bean industry in this area. So in the summertime, as those beans started to come in, as one informant of mine said, it was a rushing time at the bean market. They would be there usually they would start maybe around lunchtime, and it would be sometimes way after midnight before they got done. Because as those beans were picked, as soon as those beans were picked and those trucks were full, they would haul those to the market. Because you always wanted to get there as soon as possible, because those buyers had quotas. So if you could get there with your beans first while the demand was high, generally you got a better price.
It was very interesting, and it was your regular auctioneer. They were doing that chant that they do, and as a kid that was fascinating to me.
But one of the funniest story that I can remember on Saturdays, Henry Woods was the auctioneer at the Ashe Bean Market, and he loved wrestling. And on Saturdays, usually the growers would be out harvesting their crop, and the auctions would start at probably 1 o'clock. I don't remember for sure, but probably 1 o'clock, and then would have an auction every hour. But Henry, he loved wrestling, and over against the wall there was a TV over there, and there was like a 15-foot bench in front of the TV. But Henry would get over there, and he was right into the TV watching wrestling. And it'd come auction time, and they couldn't get Henry to leave the wrestling for the auction. So the whole market would be shut down waiting on Henry to finish his wrestling. And sometimes it'd go on for a pretty long time. But when he finished up, they'd go back to auctioning beans.
The bean markets in Ashe County operated from early July to the first frost, which killed the beans and ended the season, usually in late September or early October. Operating 6 days a week, the Ashe markets only closed on Sunday. On a big day, 15 to 20,000 bushels of green beans were sold, bought by buyers representing national chains like Winn-Dixie, A&P, and Publix grocery stores. Other agents bought beans for canneries like Bush Brothers Beans in Tennessee and Ashe County's own cannery, Beaver Creek Beans. Independent markets as far away as Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Alabama, Cincinnati, Ohio, and New York also sent buyers to buy Ashe County beans. These buyer agents often competed against each other to get the best beans at the cheapest prices, so farmers never knew from day to day and week to week exactly what price their beans would bring when they delivered their crops to auction.
The bean market was pretty volatile. It was going to depend on quality of beans and the buyers that showed up and what their quotas were and what they were looking for. We're going to see a much higher per bushel price on something that would be good enough for the freezer market or the fresh market versus just a canning bean. And again, the sooner you got there, while the demand was high, there's a good chance your beans were going to sell for more than if it's 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we know we had auctions that late when buyers are just trying to finish up and get their quotas and get them moved out.
There was good days and bad days. It could fluctuate as much as $6 from one day to the next.
When supply would outdo demand and the price of beans would drop, those rail cars would actually get dumped with beans. And they weren't in baskets. They were just loose dumped into rail cars and sent up north. And that was kind of what we considered our salvage market. I think about what it would be like to see beans just bulk dumped into a rail car and watch it go down the tracks.
Whether Ashe County green beans were hauled away by train or by truck, there's no getting around the fact that the local bean market's primary function was to sell and deliver green beans all over the East Coast. This simple fact does not take away from the reality that the bean markets were also important culturally, frequently being important gathering spots for entire families from all over the county.
It was a great time for people to gather and socialize, because as you're waiting for your beans to be sold, you're sitting there. What else you going to do but you're going to visit? But it was a great time for networking and community building for this area as well. The towns and little cities were booming during this period because there was so much money moving in. People were coming into the towns and they were trading, and there was, again, that movement of cash for this commodity goods.
It was a social event, especially on the weekends. I mean, people would come in there and you know, they would have their wives with them, and it was a visiting and a social event around there.
But the treat of the day would be we'd get to go to the bean market with him when he sold the beans. We would go there, and they had a snack bar, you could get a hot dog and a soft drink or something, and that was a big treat to us kids. So we'd do that, and we didn't worry about the bean selling. We just went and got something to eat and visited with our friends.
A friend of mine's dad had some beans, had some tender greens and pole beans. We picked them, and that evening we got to go to the bean market riding on the back of the truck. We went up there, and, you know, we'd get up there and we'd have bean fights, you know, break beans and just burn each other up with throwing them at each other.
For all the benefits, both financial and cultural, that the green bean markets brought to Ashe County over the years, it's important to note that they also, unknowingly, were a gateway through which a terrible pest was introduced to local farmers in the early 1960s. Prior to the 60s, raising green beans had been fairly easy in the Appalachian Mountains, as there were very few natural pests. It's believed, however, that somewhere around 1960, the dreaded Japanese beetles hitched a ride into the county on the bean baskets that were brought to the bean markets each year for the farmers to pick and deliver their beans. The introduction of these beetles was absolutely devastating to Ashe County agriculture.
They were just gobbling up the bean vines. And I was in one field out in Beaver Creek at the time, and you could see them up in the tops of trees, and you could see them on the vines, and growers at that time didn't know how to combat that.
So no matter what you're growing, something always wants to eat it. And throughout agricultural history in the United States, most of the bugs that we've had to deal with aren't native to here. We brought them in from other countries because of international trade. And there's a period of time where the product gets in pretty bad shape because you don't know how to protect it. Well, in the 60s, Japanese beetles were new, and they made their way to Ashe County, and for a couple of years, they devastated green beans in the early 60s. Now, they don't actually eat the green beans themselves. What they'll do is they just come along and chomp and eat the leaves. And they're a pretty big beetle, so if you have a large population of them, they could defoliate acres of green beans in a day. So it took a few years to figure out how to control them, but eventually my grandfather worked with them and started finding out ways to apply certain pesticides and trained on how to apply them properly.
And Japanese beetles they could obliterate a green bean patch overnight. They would eat all the leaves off of it. So we had to do a lot of spraying after the Japanese beetles showed up. I mean, we used these old crank sprayers. They had a fan in them. And you loaded the 7 dust, that's what we used, was 7 dust. And it had a big long chute on the end of it. So you could crank it and it would actually shoot the dust out 20 feet. So I can remember walking through the rows, cranking that thing, and by the time you got to the end of a green bee row, if you look back, the ground was just green with Japanese beetles.
Despite the initial devastation caused by the Japanese beetles, Ashe County farmers soon learned to deal with them, and by the mid-60s had their fields producing record numbers of green beans, which resulted in millions of new dollars flowing into the county over the next decade.
They called it green gold. That was a term for beans for a while. It was green gold. When you could make $1.50, and up to $2 plus, and then we're looking at $3 and almost sometimes $4 a bushel per beans, you could actually stand to make a lot more money than possibly you've ever seen.
When you think about economic impact, you think about those dollars that come in for the beans themselves, but then the farmer has to buy supplies. The workers buy clothes and groceries and gas, and there's trucks. There's all these ancillary industries that pop up and are supported by that one industry. So anytime something's a major industry, the spider webs and the fingers that go out into the community are a vital aspect of the vitality of our community. And in Appalachia, we've often been isolated in the mountains. So part of the piece that I was really interested in is the resiliency of Appalachia, that we have a way of figuring out how to take care of ourselves. And when we can get stuff shipped out, a product like beans that goes from New York all the way down to Florida, we bring dollars back in here. Those are new dollars. And new dollars in the Appalachian Mountains are worth more than any other dollar, because then we get to spread them back out to other people all over. And they lift, it really is the tide that lifts all boats.
In the late 1970s and early 1980s, after 40 plus years of commercial dominance, the green bean industry essentially disappeared in Ashe County. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly over a period of years. This decline was largely due to the industrialization of agriculture that was occurring in other parts of the country. Big business figured out how to use mechanization to grow and process huge crops in the Midwest and Florida at a cheaper and more efficient scale. The other major factor was that the available labor pool in Ashe County was drying up.
As societies advance, it is a privilege to not have to grow your own food. So all those philosophical things that we get to debate about, like the environment, like where our kids will go to school and what our kids will become, those are privileges that industrial agriculture has provided us, because we don't have to worry about growing our own food. I think that as you want to do better, or your kids to do better than you did, a lot of people grew up picking beans and they said, I don't want my kids to have to worry about buying their clothes from green bean picking money. So they were able to do that for them. They didn't have to go out and work as hard. So we didn't have the labor pool. And green beans are tremendously labor intensive, especially pole beans.
After dying out in the 1980s, no one ever thought that the green bean industry would come back to Ashe County. As the years and then the decades passed, it seemed to be a chapter of history that was doomed to be forgotten. But then a local farmer got curious. With the help of an extension agent and some Heritage Morse 191 pole bean seed that had been stored away for many years by an old bean grower, Don Smith started to investigate if Heritage green beans had a commercial future.
What got me interested in green beans was one of my best friends is Dwight Furchess. His family was big into the green beans and bush beans, pole beans, and we play golf a lot together, and he would talk about some of the stories of growing beans, and that kind of got my interest going in green beans. And then I just saw an opportunity maybe to do something that nobody was doing anymore. The biggest challenge was finding somebody that actually knew how it used to be done. Nobody knew the distance between the poles, how far to go between the poles. We talked to several different growers that used to grow them, older guys, but they couldn't remember how far the poles were and how to wire, how to string it and all that. So we came up with some new ways to do that. It was just a learning process because there was nobody left that could tell me really how they did it.
In anything that you do, there is a learning curve. It seems like every year we we find a new hurdle to cross, but also we'll get a little better crossing the hurdles from the past.
The first beans that we used were Morris's 191. Dwight always talked about how pretty a bean it was and how vigorous it was, but you could see the difference. We also bought commercial seed and planted, but the 191 seed was a lot vigorous. The vines grew faster, and there was a lot more foliage. The pole bean is a much better bean than the normal green bean you get in the grocery store. It actually has a bean in it. There's a big bean. I mean, you look at the beans you're buying in the grocery store now, it's just the hull. They've been bred, the bean's been bred out of the bean. So the pole bean has a big bean in it, has a lot more flavor. It's a lot better bean.
And I believe that we're having a revolution in what I call slow food. We went through a fast food phase, but now we're starting to appreciate how things got to our table and the work that was done in them, and also how they actually taste. Because an industrial green bean doesn't taste like one of these Ashe County green beans. And that's what we're trying to get people back to. It may take just a little bit more work on your end in your home, but it's going to be worth it. Not only are you going to get to taste a better bean, you're actually going to get to taste a piece of history.